So if somebody's watching this and they're going through this domestic violence, whether it's emerged during home isolation or whether this is something that's been happening and work was their way of getting away from it for a while, but now they're working from home, they're in it, and they've got this added anxiety of the fact that something might happen, and I'm dealing with my work colleagues who now may all find out, if they don't already know, then what can people do apart from going out and saying, put me into isolation somewhere else for 2 weeks so that I can have a respite? I mean, what do people do?
So there's so many different laws in different countries around whether or not even people can go out if they wanted to have a different place of work, for example. And so it's really around this lack of resource. And so the biggest thing is around safety, and it's safety first. And so safety planning is really, really key, even in our own homes, and understanding what that looks like. And we can go onto many websites and download essentially checklists of what a safety plan might look like. But it's really, you need to connect with someone where you can around really implementing that correctly, because often what I've found in the past, Tim, is working with a lot of really high-risk victims is it's not what we do well, but it's what we don't do, which is where the risk of harm comes in. And so that's why I really advise people where they can and where it's safe to connect remotely with a DV expert to be able to really help them with a safety plan. And look, the next thing is around establishing communication, and I think this is where we can all really, really help. So if we suspect that someone is impacted by domestic violence and we've had a relationship with them in the past as a friendship, it might be a colleague, it might be a neighbour, it may be a family member, your best friend. So it's about communicating with them the same way that we communicated with them pre-COVID. And so if we can communicate with them, of course it's going to be remotely using our phones or computers or emails or however it might be. But if we talk about the same things that we used to, because what happens is perpetrators are very, very clever at understanding the patterns of discussions and the types of discussions, especially when they're monitoring their partners. And so what we don't want is we don't want the lines of communication to change in any way. So suddenly, if we're starting to ring someone and say, hey, can you talk right now? It creates danger, because that's not safe. Or if we ring someone and say, hey, are you okay? Or is there anything you need? Do you need a hand with anything? Can I help? Those sorts of discussions can, even though they're the best intentions, they can create a lot more unintended harm, and it makes it really unsafe for the person that could be at risk in isolation in their own home. So the biggest thing is really to, if you ring someone and say, hey, it's really tough right now for everyone. How is your whole family going? Just change it just slightly so it's inclusive of everyone. And so rather than just that one person, because what they'll do is if they can ask for help, they will when it's safe to do so. So we really need to take their lead on that. So that's really the biggest piece of advice that I could really impart, and also just raising our understanding of what danger and high risk actually is.
It makes a lot of sense, because you don't know if somebody's monitoring at the moment that you call, and that's when you could tip them off to the fact that and that makes it threatening, and then you lose that line of communication altogether, and then you can't help them.
That is exactly correct. And so when we talk about ringing and getting help for people, we have to be really, really mindful and careful around how we do that, and because sometimes that can actually create significant risk. So if, for example, you're a neighbour and you hear some banging and crashing, smashing property, people screaming or crying or arguments, absolutely call the police and or emergency services and get the help. But if someone's gone, that you know that you suspect something's happening and you haven't seen anything and you haven't been told anything directly, I just urge real caution in terms of speaking up and getting a third party to intervene without the consent from your friend or who you're trying to help. Because what I've found in the past is, even from my policing experience, where we would in the earlier days when we were still learning about family violence and the impacts to families, is when we went and arrested someone, and that was fine, we'd take them out of the house for a couple of days, and then they would then subsequently return on bail. It's when they return that risk of harm really increases, and there's that extra pressure on people about, what did you say, who did you
Yep.
tell, and this is where the elevated risk comes in. So it's not necessarily at the time of seeking the assistance, it's actually afterwards that where the real risk of harm can come in. So that's where we need the safety planning and to really manage it carefully.